Cracks return to Dreamland. Top 5 Kirby games. This video was suggested to me by longtime viewer and commenter, the demonic one LK, and I said, you know what, that's something I've been wanting to do for a while, so let's do it. I've tried to make this video a few times, and something didn't feel right, and finally I figured out what the problem was, so that might cause a little bit of controversy, so I'm going to clear that up right away. First things first, no spin-off games, Star Stacker, Air Ride, things of that nature just aren't going to make the cut. While I do enjoy those games to a certain degree, especially Air Ride, they're not Kirby games, they're just games with a Kirby coat of paint on them, so none of those. Also, the problem with my list was this game. I was sacrificing the integrity of the list for personal nostalgia. As much as I love Kirby's Dreamland, this is not one of the top 5 Kirby games. It's just not. There's so many aspects of this game that are just not up to par with later releases. There's no copy abilities. It's so easy. It's so short. It's just my personal nostalgia of this game was really like blinding me, and it just, the list suffered, so I decided I had to cut this game. As much as I don't want to, as much as I love this game, as important as this game is to me, it's not a top 5 Kirby game. It's just not. If somebody's getting into Kirby and recommending they go play this game, it's almost like recommending somebody that asks, you know, what's a good Dragon Quest game to get into, and you say, go play Dragon Warrior 1 on the NES. Yeah, that's good if you never want them to play another one. While I think everybody should play this game, I wouldn't say this is a good place to start, and it's just not the best. You know, I love it, yes, I think it's a fantastic game, it's one of my favorite games of all time, but that is for a whole bunch of other reasons. So I had to sacrifice that. So once I figured out that was what was dragging my list down, I was able to complete the order, and let's get right into it, man. Number 5 is where the copyability all started. Kirby's Adventure on the NES. Sorry about the lighting and the glare. I mean, there's really not much I can do. So fucking ghetto. So yeah, this is the introduction of the copyability, which, you know, has stuck around since, and it ultimately turned the game from a fun game, in my opinion, into an amazing game. And you know, Kirby's gone on to be one of the top selling 50 game franchises of all time. And I really think if they didn't add the copyability, that might not be true, because it would probably isolate older players from getting into the games, because it would just been too easy and not enough depth. While you can get through the game without using the copyability, it adds depth, replay value, and just, you know, spruces things up. The mechanic really turned the franchise around, in my opinion, and I think ultimately Kirby games would have suffered without it. And as much as I think Kirby's Adventure is a great game, you know, it's number 5. Also, you know, these two I've decided to put as a tie. This is Kirby's Nightmare in Dreamland. And the reason I made these a tie is because this game it's essentially just this game. It's a reboot of the original. It's got updated graphics. You know, some things have been tweaked, but the general areas and stages have been left intact. Some sacrifices were made in order to I don't know what I'm trying to say. some sacrifices to the stages were made because of the graphical updates. There had to be a little bit of tweaks here and there to the stages, but for the most part, they were left intact. And it's fantastic. There's a lot of good stuff about these games. This one is the first time you can play as Meta Knight in like kind of a sub game, so that's kind of interesting. Let's see what else. This also has the introduction of the Nightmare Wizard, which is like a favorite antagonist of mine. So a lot of cool stuff about these games, but they are just number 5. So moving on, number 4 is the latest traditional Kirby game, and that is Triple Deluxe. This game was one of my favorite games. The year it came out, it's still, one of my favorite games. Obviously, number 4, just because it's number 4, is no knock against this game. There's been like 20-something Kirby games released. And it's fantastic. This game is everything that I wanted it to be. My biggest complaint, and I've said it before, is the mini games. There's the rhythm game, the shitty fighting game. I could live without that shit. I would rather see all the money that that it costs to develop those go into the main game, in my opinion. I get the gimmick, the Triple Deluxe 3D, 3DS. I get it. You know what I mean? But I think it's the game that suffers. And when the game suffers for a gimmick, to me, that's a problem. And I know that Kirby games have had mini games, especially recently. It's just been a thing. It's like you get a Kirby game and you get some mini games. I can live without them. I rarely play them. I always just check them out to see if they're any good. But it's not the reason that I like Kirby games. And but that's just me focusing on the negatives, which isn't the point of this video. The positives is the gameplay is great, the level design is awesome, the music is good, the graphics look fantastic, the 3DS actually looks good on this game. It's one of the few games I use the 3D on because I'm just not crazy about it in general. And it's just a really solid game, and I really enjoyed it. And this game is exactly what I was hoping for. I've been let down a lot with Kirby, like Canvas Curse or whatever. That's the last thing as a big Kirby fan that like I wanted out of the franchise, and it was kind of like a kick in the dick for me. But Triple Deluxe really nailed it, and it's a fantastic game. So number 3 is going to be another remake. That is Kirby Superstar Ultra. And I know, like I literally just said that I wasn't crazy about mini games and stuff in Kirby games, and you're probably thinking, well, isn't this just a collection of mini games? Not really. There's a few mini games, and they're forgettable. I think I might have spent a few minutes on each. But what this game does extremely well is it's almost like a compilation of small standard Kirby games in one package, and some of them are just fantastic. What the fuck is the name of that one? The cave one? I can't remember. Fuck, I forgot the name. There's one stage on here that is amazing. It's huge. It's all on one map. It's one of my favorite Kirby levels of all time. Really interesting stuff. There's a boss battle that's like a turn-based RPG boss battle. It's really fucking cool. And this just, I think it tries a lot of different things, and I think that's why I like it so much. Because it has all those different traditional Kirby games like on one package. I just thought it was really cool. It's like you get a whole bunch of bite-sized Kirby games, and they're all pretty good. The mini games, admittedly, I really haven't messed with too much, but there's like a handful of like mini Kirby games on here, and it's awesome. This does have more content, obviously, than the Super Nintendo counterpart, which is still really good, and you can get on the Dream Collection, which I'll talk about later. But Kirby Superstar Ultra is definitely, I think, misinterpreted by people. I think people think this is like a Kirby like Mario Party game, and it's not. It's actually really really fantastic and has great music. There is some of the games on this cartridge just have fantastic music. And one of the biggest differences actually is one of the levels, what is it called? I think it's Spring Breeze, which the title screen didn't even used to have music on the Super Nintendo port. This is just the level of care that went into this. On the Super Nintendo version of the game, it didn't even have music on the title screen. On this port, they actually put the title screen music from Kirby's Dreamland onto the title screen of Spring Breeze, and that was just a really nice touch. And when I heard it, I was just like, my ears perked up. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. So number 3, definitely a misunderstood Kirby game. And before I move on, I do want to say for the DS, I got a handful of Kirby games. Mass Attack, Superstar Ultra, Rainbow Curse or Canvas Curse or whatever it was called, which I'm not a fan of. I don't own it. I'd like to get it at some point. And then there's Squeak Squad. And Squeak Squad I've played a little bit of in the past, and it's really good. It's a traditional Kirby game. I really like it. And to be completely honest, if I owned the game and had finished the game and spent more time with it, it could easily have made this list. But I haven't finished the game. I haven't put a ton of time into it, so I didn't feel right including it. So ultimately, it didn't really come into the overall analysis of things. And I do believe that is the only traditional Kirby game that I have not played or own in some capacity. So take that with a grain of salt. It might be fantastic. It might be top 5 worthy. But at this point, I really just have no way of knowing. So maybe I'll update this list at a later time if I ever am able to find a copy. Okay, so moving on to number 2 is a personal favorite of mine and maybe a bit of a guilty pleasure. In theory, this game should probably be closer to number 4 or number 5. But I fucking love it, and that game is Kirby's Dreamland 2. This game just does so much right. So, in this game we go back to Dreamland from the first game, and it picked up a lot of what Kirby's Adventure did right. It added the copies abilities, and it did some new things. The biggest being the animal helpers, and honestly, that's why this game rates so high for me personally. I fucking love the animal helpers, man. It's awesome, especially Rick the hamster. I think I've heard somewhere, I don't know if it's true, but the name Rick is supposed to be a derivative of the Japanese word Riku, I think, which is Japanese for land. And then, of course, there's the owl Ku and the starfish, who I can't remember his name, but I think Ku might be like related to the Japanese word for cloud or something. So, I mean, that's just kind of cool. But Rick the hamster is awesome. He's obviously my favorite animal helper, as you can see right here. He's made cameos in other games. He was in Dreamland 3, obviously, but he's made cameos in the Crystal Shards and Star Stacker. Even in Triple Deluxe, I think it's in one of the fighting stages. He's a contender. So he's popped up in other games, but I'd love to see a return of the animal helpers and the way that they were used in Dreamland 2 and 3. And I did some back and forth about whether I wanted to put Dreamland 2 or Dreamland 3 on this list, and it just comes down to Dreamland 3 being so expensive. That game cost a fucking fortune, and honestly, I don't think it's worth it. It's a pretty game. It's got kind of weird graphics. They're almost like a watercolor look. It looks different than most Kirby games. But the price, I think, is a huge hindrance. But the biggest problem with that game for me personally is the slowdown. The game is plagued with slowdown. It's fucking unbelievable. I personally don't own a cartridge. My brother does. And, I mean, playing through it can be really frustrating. because there's just so much slowdown, and it happens more often than you'd think. So I think 2 is just a better game overall, and it's a personal favorite of mine, and I will be the first to admit it probably should be a little lower on the list, but it's my list, so it's gonna be at number 2. And number 1, my favorite Kirby game is a Wii game, and the Wii was really, really good to Kirby. Not counting this game, which I am not a fan of. I have gone back and given this game another try. It's not awful. It's actually kind of relaxing, but I'm just not crazy about it. Some parts I like when you're the tank and you're like, it's almost like a shooting level. Like, I like certain parts of the game, but you really feel like it's not a Kirby game. Like, when this game was in development, it wasn't intended to be a Kirby game, and that comes across, in my opinion. But my favorite Kirby game is Kirby's Return to Dreamland. Amazing game. And this game went through development hell. I think this game was in development for something like a decade. It was supposed to be, I think originally on the N64, it was supposed to be the follow-up to the Crystal Shards. And then that version ended up getting scrapped. And then they made another version, which was supposed to be like a big open-world 3D Kirby game. It was supposed to come out on the GameCube. That version got scrapped, and I believe there was even another version that ultimately got scrapped again. So there was like 3 different iterations of this game at one point, and it started to feel like it was just never going to come out. And I guess the problem, Halo Laboratories made a comment that the problem with the game was they had such a big focus on multiplayer that it just wasn't working. So they decided to strip things back and kind of return to the single player being the focus of the game. And I think it worked out fantastically. And I can tell you, I was a huge skeptic of this game. I thought this was the nail in the coffin for Kirby games. When this game came out, I'm like, this is going to be fucking terrible. It had 3D modeling, which, you know, Kirby's always been a sprite-based video game. And when I saw the 3D modeling, I just wasn't feeling that. I wasn't feeling the 2.5D levels. I was nervous to play it, honestly. But then once I finally sat down and played it, all that just went away. Really, really enjoyed it. Fantastic stuff. I mean, you can play 4 players, which I think the most I've played with is 3. I don't think I've played with 4. I know I've played with 3, and it's great. As a multiplayer game, it's great. But as a single-player game, it's great as well. You can play with the GameCube controller, the Pro controller. I mean, there's no fucking goofy motion bullshit. It's just a really solid Kirby game, and honestly, it's grown on me just exponentially over the years. And in my opinion, it has some of the highest replay value of any Kirby game. And it's also got some meat to it. It's not like a really short game. And I think it's fantastic. And yeah, I just did a complete 180 on this game. So I don't know what else to say. It's fucking amazing. It is kind of a pricey game, but it did get a reprint in the last like month or 2. So there's copies at like every GameStop now. It was hard to find, but there are copies everywhere. So that should have a big impact on the price eventually. So don't overpay for it, but definitely do yourself a favor and grab a copy if you've never played it, because it is fantastic. So, that being my number 1 game, I don't think I could do this list and not mention the Dream Collection that also came out on the Wii. And this is amazing. As a Kirby fan, this was like a gift from Nintendo. This is one of the few things that I feel like Nintendo has given me as a fan of Nintendo in recent memory. Like, this was just amazing. And I had a nightmare revolving around this game. I think I've told this story before. I picked it up, and on my way to college, left it in my car, left my windows cracked because it was hot as fuck, and that was like I was picking up my pre-order, somebody stole this game, my basketball sneakers. I was devastated, and it took me a long time to re-buy it just because I was pissed off. And finally, when I did re-get it, Super impressed. Love the CD, the soundtrack that's included. The games that you get, you know, you get Kirby's Dreamland, which is a personal favorite of mine, but it's really not, you know, that lengthy of a game. You get Kirby's Adventure, fantastic. Kirby's Dreamland 2, again, fantastic. You get the original Super Nintendo version of Superstar. Kirby's Dreamland 3, which is probably the main reason to get this game because it's way cheaper to pick this up than it is the Super Nintendo cartridge. And you get Crystal Shards, which is not my favorite game, but I know a lot of people like it. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of it. I don't like the 3D environments, but like most Kirby games, it has grown on me over time. So a really fantastic package, and I was going to say, if you were going to pick up anything Kirby related and you're just getting into Kirby, I would say go for what the fuck am I doing holding that up? Go for these. Get Return to Dreamland, the Dream Collection, and then if you're feeling it, maybe pick up Triple Deluxe as well, because again, fantastic. So, you know, as much as we haven't really had a great new Kirby game, we've gotten some cool stuff. I mean, I know Triple Deluxe is new, but we haven't gotten a good console Kirby game. Like, this was the last, like, great console Kirby game, and before this, the last one was Crystal Shards. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people forget that. There was no Kirby on the GameCube, you know, like, it was Crystal Shards on the 64, and then finally we got Return to Dreamland, and since then we haven't really gotten a console Kirby game, which is a shame. So hopefully Nintendo will give us something, throw us a bone, maybe on the fucking NX or whatever, I don't know. But, you know, in recent history, Kirby's kind of become a handheld game, and that's fine, because it fits the handheld gaming well, and like, as you can see, a lot of these games on my list were handheld games, or ports of games to be handheld games. But the console Kirby experience is still fantastic, and I would love to see another one at some point. And that's it. I'm just rambling at this point, 22 minutes. Sorry about the lengthy video, but it was a lot of fun for me to talk about these games, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Crack out.